Well, well, well. Let's get back to the drawing board, my friends, because today we are continuing our discussions on a guy whose overall trade profile has been so intriguing to this audience, from Montreal Canadiens fans to fans of any other team. This has been a hot topic since the summer, pretty much, and we are re-exploring it here today because of a new piece published on BleacherReport.com. Let's head over to the St. Louis Blues, who have not really been doing all too hot this season. I don't know if you noticed, but out of all the NHL teams that have been disappointing, you can say that Toronto is in there, Edmonton's in there. St. Louis, oddly enough, they're in there too. And it all boils down to magnitude, you know? Like, of course, the Blues are doing a lot worse this season than Toronto and Edmonton, but a lot of folks thought that Edmonton would be better. A lot of folks thought that St. Louis would be better. And I think the magnitude of disappointment for either of these teams is kind of comparable, despite the raw, hard difference in point production. Either way, today we're talking about one of the main St. Louis Blues pieces that was blasted out there on the trade block. A guy that we made several videos about, connecting him to teams like the Montreal Canadiens and others. You know him, you love him. Today, we're talking about Jordan Kyrou one more time. And this article published by Lyle Richardson that talks about 5 NHL trade landing spots for him amid trade rumors. Now, Jordan Kyrou needs no introduction. He's a 27-year-old forward, 6'1", 196, a right-handed center right wing, making $8.125 million a year. This season, he's got 11 points in 19 games played, which is below standard for Kyrou. He has had multiple 70-point seasons, 3 in the past 4 seasons combined. And this year, he's on pace for 47 points, which would be a pretty steep decline from the norm. The fact that he is 27 years old and signed till 2031 bodes very well for any team that's trying to project this guy as a longer-ish term player and piece on their roster, a guy that would realistically find a way to pot 70-point seasons year in and year out until he at least hits 30, 31, 32. He is in that territory of player where I think he has shown off the talent and the skill, he has shown off the speed, he's a very quick skater, and he's got some pretty good scoring elements. There's a lot to like out of Kyrou. But things in St. Louis are not looking all too hot, and Frank Seravalli went out there and said that Blues GM Doug Armstrong had informed his peers he was open for business, to which the Athletic's Jeremy Rutherford later confirmed. Rutherford mentioned that Kyrou's name was mentioned as a trade candidate. He reminded us that the 28-year-old right wing was a subject of rumors earlier in the summer until his full no-trade clause kicked in on July 1st. According to Rutherford, a league source said a team reached out to the Blues about Kyrou after he was scratched from the Blues' November 6 game against the Buffalo Sabres. However, it's unknown if that club actually made an offer, and there's no indication that Armstrong is necessarily shopping Kyrou. Assuming he is to be traded, though, he would be an expensive acquisition. He carries an AAV of 813, and the Blues would likely set a high asking price in the trade market. Follow along as we examine Kyrou's value and which teams could be potential landing spots. Now, this article does a pretty good job of giving a holistic view of what's going on here. Given Kyrou's full no-trade clause, he has complete control. If he's willing to waive it and accept the trade, he will likely have a short list of potential destinations. Blues GM Doug Armstrong has resisted a full roster teardown in the past, preferring to gradually replace aging veterans with young NHL-ready talent from his prospect pipeline or in trades with other teams. The Hockey News' Julian Gaudio recently cited a report by Elliot Friedman claiming the Blues had a deal in place last June that would have sent Kyrou to Seattle for the 8th overall pick. There may have been other pieces involved in that deal. So, yeah, we are revisiting some of the other trade ideas. Seattle was in there. There was a bunch of conversation about Montreal, but it never got to the point where we actually had a defined trade package. We just kind of heard, oh yeah, no, Kyrou. Apparently he'd be okay with the Habs. That's amazing, right? Of course. Who wouldn't want to come play for Montreal, considering the youth and considering the progression and just where everything seems to be going and how Kyrou fits timeline-wise with this core? But Lyle Richardson does his part and projects a bunch of other teams that could be destinations as well for Kyrou. One of the honorable mentions, though, is the Detroit Red Wings. Richardson writes here that they'll eventually need a suitable replacement for aging winger Patrick Kane. They have the cap space and plenty of young players and prospects to use as trade bait, but their years outside the postseason picture could have them on his no-trade list. And while that is reasonable, I think it's fair to say, oh yeah, if the team's not doing all too well, then maybe they wouldn't really want to come over, but what are you talking about, man? The Red Wings are one of the best teams in the league right now. They're top of the Atlantic. They are literally in a top spot in this Atlantic division, and I don't think anybody really expected them to do that. It's just, you're really seeing good things out of Raymond Larkin to Brinket Kane. Seider's been looking pretty strong, even though the goaltending has been, let's face it, less than average here in Detroit. There still has been a very good amount of winning going on with this Red Wings organization, and I do think there is a surprise element that some NHL players could walk into when thinking about this team. Hey, if Detroit does prove itself as a suitable destination for a guy like Kyrou, then imagine having Kyrou and Larkin on that team, two absolute speedsters, guys whom you cannot catch up to when they have the puck. That'd be a pretty good compliment, I'd say. I'd like to have both of those guys suiting up for the same hockey team. And then you also have another write-up in this piece towards the middle part. Lyle Richardson goes out there and talks about Montreal. He says this over here: Kyrou was linked to the Canadiens earlier in the summer before his no-trade clause kicked in. They can afford to acquire him by the trade deadline when they'll have accrued over $18.7 million in cap space. They can draw on promising prospects as trade chips. However, the Canadiens' priority is depth at center, not on the wings. And so, this essentially dives into the usage angle. Do you use Kyrou as a center, or do you play him on the wing, where he has spent the majority of his time in St. Louis the past little while? It's a fair question. It's not like, oh yeah, you're just going to throw him to the Wolves and play him where he is not. Right now, Kyrou is on the second right-wing spot alongside of Dalibor Dvorsky and Pavel Buchnevich. Of course, we could also have a conversation about Dvorsky, but still, Jordan Kyrou has played center in the past, so if you are a Canadiens or a Red Wings fan thinking about acquiring him as your potential second-line C, your answer down the middle, I don't want to make it seem like it's impossible, but you wouldn't be doing him any favors by acquiring him and just throwing him to the Wolves in that spot right away. Maybe you have to get him accustomed to the systems first, have him play some games, and then get him knowing about the expectations and what it takes for this team to be successful. But both Detroit and Montreal will have cap space. They both have lots of prospects and picks. They both would have the assets to send St. Louis's way should the Blues be interested in some sort of a future-based deal. They wanted the 8th overall pick for him. That almost went through, but unfortunately, that pick still belonged to Seattle and Kyrou still belonged to St. Louis. So maybe there is a little bit more bargaining needing to be done here. Either way, this trade article will be linked in the description if you want to go out there and read it yourself and take a look at some of the other teams that Lyle Richardson mentions are potential Kyrou suitors. What are your thoughts on these two over here, Montreal and Detroit? Jordan Kyrou, yay or nay? What do you think the trade package is? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.